Hello, hello, everybody out there in Instagram land. It is your host, Sean Dale, for this week's Black History Month talk back. And today I have again with me Mr. William Harlan Dickerson II hanging out with us. Yep, keeping it trill. And we have a special guest with us. Her name is Alexis Craig-Hart. You may have seen her piece last week yes, titled Alexis,
What does it mean to be black?
what does it mean to be black? And it was a really cool piece, and we enjoyed having her submit to the show. So now what we're going to do is we're going to do this a little bit differently this week. We're going to upload our video via Zoom so that we can all have a proper chat together. And then what we want you to do is to submit your questions and stuff so that we can actually comment back next week, because we expect to have another person with us in a talk back. So we're probably going to have to do it this way again. So you shoot us your questions. Next week, we will answer them and we'll just roll on from there. So without further ado, this week we're talking about oppression. Okay, last week we talked a little bit about identity and what that means, as a black person, and what that entails in each other's journeys, and how the nuances of that change from day to day and from person to person. But this week, we're going to be tackling the subject of oppression and how that manifests itself in the Black community as well. So, William, yeah, take it away, man.
Yeah, this is wonderful. I'm so happy to be on this Zoom yet again, talking with you all. And I think the other thing I need to say is I promise you I'm not driving. We're just in the car. With everything happening with Zoom, you gotta you gotta find places that are quiet for sure. And I have a 2.5-year-old son who will be waking up here pretty soon. So yeah, so this is like a really, I think, an important topic when it comes to race. You know, Part of like the idea, I think, of, you know, like white supremacy and like how it like works in our context, in the United States at least, is um, when you have a conversation about race, you can't have that conversation without having a conversation about oppression. um, and that like and that you can't have a conversation about oppression without understanding that the context of race and how we experience it is based around a hierarchy that relates to white supremacy. That the idea that like white people are that like the white skin, not white people, white skin,
Mm-hmm.
um, is like a supreme color that is connected to like identity. It's connected to intelligence. It's connected to ability and aptitude. It's connected to a lot of different things. And so the darker that you get, there is a belief that like that 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 uh that like that you become inferior and therefore should be dominated because of your inferiority. And so if you can't really have a conversation about race, and this is like, I mean, this is like, in a lot of ways, we could talk about colorism. We could talk about all the other ways in which like racial oppression plays out. But it all still connects itself to what I believe is like is white supremacy. And so if you want to have a conversation about that, I think that like that the grounding like starts there from my perspective. But Alexis, I don't know. What do you think?
I absolutely wholeheartedly agree. It's about formulating an ideology that keeps the oppression going. So by teaching people that idea that white is right, which is essentially what white supremacy is how you keep the facade. And actually, what was it? One of the pieces, the dance piece, that was, what is it called? It's called
Oh, it's less than 3/5
Less Than Three
Yeah,
Fifths.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
by
so he,
Quentin Sledge, by the way, who is an amazing dancer, an amazing choreographer over here in Dayton, through the Dayton Arts Collective, I want to say. I'll find that out for sure, and I'll reclaim that. But yes,
Yeah,
continue. I just
it
had
was
to
very
look.
beautiful. Yeah, and in it, I had to kind of like listen back to it again because the language was a bit dense, but he was speaking the words of a slave owner who was admitting the fallacy that enslaved people aren't people. Like he is admitting, we have been telling a lie in order to have property. So like it's in a means. White supremacy is a means to an end. It's to keep a lie going in order to profit. And at the end of the day, like a lot of people, I think we all have to accept that. And I think 2020 people are I mean, a lot of people already knew that. Black people are people, but a lot of people I feel like haven't even told themselves that they were believing that. You know what I mean? Like some people, like the lie is so deeply ingrained that the lighter you are, the better you are. That some people are thinking, oh, that's not me. Like just because I prefer or lighter people, or just because I love Mariah Carey but I hate Lupita Nyong'o, or that doesn't mean I have that idea. But like really, that's where that idea comes from. Like people have to start questioning their behavior and their actions and realize that a lot of the things that we say and do is tied back to white supremacy. Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. We have
Yeah,
to
yeah, yeah. That's
discuss.
great. That's great. That's great. You know, it's so um that the piece, the three-fifths piece is a really powerful piece. Um you know, as I like been doing a lot of like studying and reading about like the three-fifths argument and like where it came from, the ideology of it, and then like the impact that it's had is like the so it was like slave owners were like trying to get like voting power during that particular time, and like the voting power that they were trying to get was the ability to be able to control elections so that they could continue to keep holding on to their slaves. And so in their particular context, they could actually make slaves like vote the way they wanted them to. They just take them in there and make them vote for whatever. And so in order to do that, you gotta like have like some kind of way of like being able to connect them to being human. But if you connect them to being fully human, right, then you have to have a whole other set of conversations about whether or not they should be enslaved, right? Whether or not they should have like access to um uh what's the word, like to all of the freedoms that were supposed to be awarded to humans on in our and like the United States like Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, right? If I'm a full human, then like I actually am supposed to have access to them things. And but if I'm only a slave, then I can't actually use your body to actually get me the thing that I want to do. And so that's where the three-fifths compromise actually starts to come from, is the idea of like the North not wanting the South to have like the kind of power that they were trying to go after, while also like maintaining the argument that like we are like enslaving human beings, you know.
Yeah.
And so
And
what
it keeps,
I think that people like what ended up happening though is that the oppression that came from that was something that we're still dealing with today, which is like both the ideology and then like what's still written in our constitution is that like that there's this three-fifths like compromise that's like still sitting and embedded in the bedrock of at least the United States empire. And so when you think about it from that perspective, it's like it's huge when you think about all the different ways I think oppression shows up.
Mm.
And I'll just say one more thing about this, right? Because I just think it's important. When I think about like racial oppression or white supremacy, I think about like four categories or four ways in which oppression shows up. And this is like actually adopted from like a set of trainings and race theory that people have been putting out there called the four eyes of oppression.
Mm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so the idea, go ahead.
Oh no, I was agreeing because I remember I've heard you talk about this.
Yeah. So I'll make sure I'll just do this real quick. So like the 4 eyes of oppression is like really basically breaking out oppression into 4 categories that they just happen to use I words for. So the first is ideological, and so like how oppression plays out because of our ideology. Racial oppression plays out because of our ideology. So we think a thing, and then we like start to like maintain the thought of that thing. So it's like stereotypes as are things that come like from ideologies, right? But then from ideology, you go into like internalization, right? The internalized oppression. And so you have internalized white supremacy, and you also have internalized black inferiority or brown inferiority, or you name it, right? That then like starts to play out. And so that happens with, the way in which people of color think about their bodies and think about how they relate to the world, and also like how they relate to whiteness, and like how whiteness relates to those things as well. Then you have institutional, which is like how it plays out in our everyday society, right? So an institutional oppression is the three-fifths compromise, right? Because I have black skin, I'm only three-fifths of a human. And so that plays out in terms of what I have access to and don't have access to. And then last but not then the interpersonal, right? You can flip flop these, you can tell them however you want, but the interpersonal is then how that carries out when I like have an encounter with someone. So like when you, for example, with police stuff in the United States context, right? When I engage a police officer, if that police officer um, relates to me as if I'm a criminal before he knows exactly who I am, that's like a like something that is both institutional, but it also plays out in an interpersonal way. Um, and so, yeah, so it's just like, and microaggressions is another way of thinking about interpersonal, right? Um, so yeah, so I wanted to, like hear what you guys thought about that, or think about like that kind of framework.
Yeah, and Alexis, you had something that you were going to interject and say. I wanted to make sure that that was said. Yeah.
Yes. As way before you mentioned the eyes, I was gonna you
Sorry.
pointed out power. No, you're good. Like because it comes down to power, in terms of like the motivation to uphold institutional racism and interpersonal racism and all these things is the power dynamic. Because even though the three-fifths, you were saying it was about voting power, but it comes back to the whole power dynamic. I was just thinking, I mean, it's a random thought because now I'm like, oh, my thoughts are kind of all over the place. Since you mentioned the eyes, I was also thinking about bringing it back to UK Black history, because I
Yeah.
think we have a very different dynamic to them. And learning recently this year about how they were still paying off slave owners up to like 2015 for the slaves they lost, like paying those family members. So it's a lot of these eyes mix up with the institutional and the interpersonal and the internalization and ideology. Like it all kind of blends in together, because that idea of your government or your monarch or whatever, your country still up to this century still thinks of it as a burden that they don't have slaves. Like I think we talk a lot about American slavery, but there's not really like an examination of what that has done to them. And I think it's really interesting the difference of how we discuss racism, or at least what I've spoken to Black British people, like how we discuss racism, because I had this like so strange idea, and I don't know where I got it from, that racism isn't like as big in the UK until I got there, and I was like, whoa, hello.
It's like you said, it's a different kind of racism. It's not, I mean, even though they did obviously have slaves and stuff like that, their form of racism is different than an American form of racism. I almost like, in my opinion, and you can correct me if I'm wrong too, but like, I felt like racism in the UK doesn't have that, doesn't involve the Ku Klux Klan, doesn't involve that kind of, you know what I mean? So there's a different kind of switch with it. It's more of the microaggressions and all that kind of stuff that you see, and like the lack of representation and stuff like that. You know, I don't know, but that was kind of my observation of it. But
For me, ironically enough, it was actually like really blatant in certain situations, like having people say that I was aggressive before I had even spoken or finished a sentence. Jamil was put as the slave and Catch the Slave. Like, I think, yeah, so there, I feel like we had, so back to the colorism situation, I think we had very different experiences in the UK in terms of like the directors speaking to us. And I feel like that was like the first time, this is gonna sound really bad, but I feel like in America, I was living like the light skin privilege kind of thing. And then in the UK, I was living more of like the darker skin experience, like, and being called dark skinned. And like, it was very more clear to me the system of oppression in the, like, it was very, yeah, I don't know, for some reason it made more sense to me there than it did America. Because America, I feel like we have a lot of pushback. I feel like we have I brought my book with me by Toni Morrison, The Source of Self-Regard, which is amazing, and she breaks down how oppression works and how the divisiveness of race and fascism work, and she breaks it down into like 10 parts. Construct an internal enemy. You isolate and demonize that enemy. You enlist and create sources and distributors of information who are willing to reinforce the demonizing process. You palicide all the art forms, monitor, discredit, or expel those that challenge or destabilize the process of demonization. Subvert and malign all representatives of and sympathizers with this constructed enemy. So basically, like, once you created your enemy and people believe it's the enemy, now you remove any allies that they could have and convince them that that is the enemy. Solicit from among the enemy collaborators who agree with and can sanitize the dispossession process, or wordy. 7, pathologize the enemy in scholarly and popular mediums, meaning like, I think it's kind of like, what is it? Is it eugenics? Like like making a science out of it, of how to demonize someone, criminalize the enemy, now the law, reward those that have, reward those that have punished and then maintain the system at all costs. Maintain at all costs silence. And so I feel like in the UK too, especially, like, there's this, like, they don't talk about it the way we do in America. So then, but now it's totally different. I'm like so excited to hear the way after George Floyd's murder. Well, I'm not excited about his murder, but I'm excited to hear the way a lot of Black British people are speaking about, like, no more. And it's not to say that a lot of them weren't speaking out, but I think it's about the, like Toni Morrison says, if you don't have enough allies, like, it's harder to keep something going or push back against the system. If the system has convinced people who would sympathize with you, have convinced them that you are the enemy.
That's very fair. Yeah, that's fair. And you know what? I will agree that. There's an echo. I think it's on your end, but I can't tell who's it coming from. It might be. But anyway, it doesn't matter. But I will agree that, like, I had a different, like, directorial experience and stuff like that. I mean, like I didn't see. You worked with you had some crazy experiences with some of the directors over there that and it was unfortunate, that really set you up based on that belief system. And you're right, like, because a lot of what we have experienced in the history of America has come from Great Britain. You see the origins of, the mentality and the kind of the ideologies around the view of just, non-white people, which is really interesting. But really super quick, I just want to interject just to clarify one thing. It's actually, but before we, talk more about it. It's actually greater than 3/5. I'm just terrible at math, and I didn't realize the signs. You know, I'm looking at the signs, and okay,
Yeah.
so it's 3/5 is eating the larger number or the smaller number. So 3/5 is greater. So it's greater than 3/5 is the name of Quentin's piece.
Right, right.
Right, and he's through the Dayton Dance Initiative here in Dayton, Ohio. But I just
Yeah.
want to make sure that I rectified that for you, Quentin, in case you watch this, and your people. If he doesn't, whew. But I just want to make sure that people out there know that what he's saying is we're greater than that 3/5 compromise that you guys are talking about, that you were bringing up with him and everything. But what do you think about what Alexis said about, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think that so it's like what's interesting about it is like, so I think the way in which oppression plays out in our day and age is like, it's like more insidious and it's like harder to track for people that don't have like if you aren't awake in any sort of fashion. I know we use this word woke a lot, but if you don't have like an understanding about like how racism works and like language and like the vast majority of racism that happens is microaggression. And so like and racial oppression particularly, the thing about it is like the stuff that you're saying, as soon as you said it to me, Alexis, I was like, yep, all that feels very racist to me. Like I do it right away, right? But there's a way in which the things that you say, like somebody saying that you're aggressive right off the bat, right? There's a way in which I believe white supremacy is able to hide behind this thing that's like, I don't know if you guys have heard this, but like sometimes when I'm like reacting to like the microaggression, it's like, oh, you're being too sensitive, or oh, you're like, like that's not what I meant by it, or you're putting words my mouth, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the thing about it is like what you're naming is, and this is like the thing that I really want white folks to like really understand, is like the way in which racism and racial oppression works is in our context now is that there is like deniability that is connected to it. Like I have the ability to be able to deny it because I didn't call you the N-word, or call you some kind of racial slur or whatever it is. Because I didn't use those things, it's not racism, it's something else. And so, like, one of the things I really wanted to bring out, and in our conversation is like the vast majority of racism that happens, the vast majority of oppression that happens is it is the sly comment, right? Like that's coming out the side of somebody's mouth that is like about my intelligence or it's about my ability. But you didn't actually call me the N-word. You didn't call me a racial slur. You just said all of the things that are connected to, right? It's you call me a thug before you know me or because I'm a certain way. It's the usage of uh um it's also like racial oppression is also like the Donald Trump thing where he's like, he's asked to like denounce white supremacist groups. He's
Yeah.
just asked to denounce them. Editing them, he says, what is it? Stand down and stand by, which is like, it would be one thing to say, you guys, like, stand down. We don't need you in our country. It's stand down and then stand by. Stand by is and wait for my orders.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
Wait for my orders. Stand down, stand by. That would be like if a military person heard that, they would know what you meant by that. So the idea of that, and so then we are now forced to like convince like all the communities around us. We're forced to convince people what he meant. We know what he meant because we understand what a microaggression, what dog whistle politics are. We know what he meant, and the people he was talking to knew what he meant. But he has this ability to then be able to deny it when we say, this was like a clear way in which the president of the United States is carrying out racism. And people are like, nah, you're crazy. You're crazy.
And that's the thing, the convincing part that becomes so frustrating. And then it adds to their deniability, because then you start getting more passionate and they're like, oh, look at her, she really is aggressive. And it's and
Yep.
I think this year has also taught me something too about oppression, about how about seeing the marks not just in my own form of oppression, but seeing how it overlaps in other kinds of oppressions. And because that overlap is where we can find allies in each other. Like I think, again, my experience in the UK, the sexism that I was experiencing was overlapped with the racism. So then I think that also I had to be clear on what is what, and in what ways that I could convince people to agree with me, or to see what's going on. And I think it was in the sexism section that I got people to like understand where I was coming from, but they still couldn't there were white women also experiencing the sexism, but they didn't understand the racism that was happening as well. And so I was like, I have to find where I can find whatever ally I can. But I think I've had conversations with them this year and they're like, oh my God, Alexis, we really didn't see the racism. And I was like, yes, you did not. You did not. But I think, yeah, on a, like you were saying before, microaggressions are the most common points of racism. I think it's important for all of us of all races to educate ourselves on how things work systematically. And I think, yeah, going back to the UK, the OG of systematic oppression, it really helped me understand more of the things that I had not seen, not that I didn't see in America beforehand growing up, but like I had the basic thing of, being handcuffed, or like of having, an old white lady have her dog on me or call the cops on me. But like like you said, the insidious ones, the nuanced racism was, I think the UK is, they are the experts of that. And so it was like a huge learning course in that. Yes.
Yeah. Well, I think too, or you mind if I jump in, Sean? You look like,
Please.
yeah. There's like so I live in the north, right now I'm living in like Massachusetts, Boston, New England, right?
That's where you're from too, Alexis. Yeah, she's up there too.
New York.
Yeah, okay, New York. So yeah, so you'll know what I'm talking about too. So there's a way in which I experience what you're describing about like England and that area is what I experience in New England, right? There is like a way. So in the South, in the United States South, one of the things that is refreshing is that the racism there is overt and clear. Like you're not confused about like where you're supposed to be, how you're supposed to engage with the world. And in some ways it's refreshing because like no one's gaslighting you, like you walk into a space, they don't want to serve you, they don't serve you, you know what I'm saying? And it's like or they let you know they don't want to serve you, and you get to make a decision around if you still want that bad service, like there's no like apologizing around this kind of stuff. And I think that that's the way that you actually get past, like you can actually engage a person in an argument or in a debate or in a conversation that is going to be honest about their feelings, right? The harder people to like have conversations with is people that aren't honest about their feelings or about their prejudices, or worse, are ignorant about them. Like they don't even know that they have them, or that they would deny that they have them and aren't even willing to look at that. Like, so that's like New England for me, is like we have this like what I call politeness politics, or politeness. Like everything's got to be polite before it's anything else. And so that's how they're able to use this like
The number one rule over there as well. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, that's it. I was gonna say that's also the rule. Politeness above everything.
Yeah. So
if you step outside of that line, then you're a threat, or then you're perceived as somebody who is trying to rock the boat, or I get that.
Yeah. So as long as we stay in line in the north, we're good.
Mm-hmm. That's very much the same way as it is in the UK. Yeah.
You say so? You know
Yeah,
why? Because we learned it from y'all or from there. I guess we're all from here.
but actually, I want to rewind a little bit, and bring up a piece of what, because this kind of leads into what Reese's piece was about as well,
Yeah.
and I just think that he speaks to a lot of what we're talking about now going into this conversation. And for those of y'all who didn't see it, Reese's piece, which was untitled, was amazing. Sorry, Reese's pieces. That's what you did that, but that's not what we meant. But his monologue, was excellent, and it spoke to a lot of those micro, either like overt, overt like aggressive racist traits, or microaggressions that he experiences on a daily basis, just being in the skin that he's in and in the place that he's in, and it broke my heart to watch that piece. It broke my heart because it's just, you know, it was so raw, and you could tell that he wasn't acting it. He was just telling a story. He was telling his story, and and just to see, to hear, I should say, the things that he experiences, and knowing that everyone else experiences that same thing, for all over the world, is a clear signal that there needs to be a change, right? And that oppression that this form of this form of oppression is real, and 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 like you were saying, William, about those who are either too cowardly to address it within themselves, or they're ignorant to it. They need to wake up. They got to wake up.
Yeah.
But let's talk a little bit about Reese's piece. Did you guys see it?
Yeah, I saw it. I thought that, yeah, the being followed in the shop, it goes back to the whole thing of being an enemy, being cast as an enemy or a villain before you've even done anything. Like, you don't even get a chance to be who you want to be or be anything, because you've already been placed in this role of being a thug or being aggressive. I thought it was interesting that when he said, that the same thing is happening all around the world. Like, all around the world, Black people are experiencing this thing of being cast as a villain. And I think in some ways it's disheartening, but in other ways it's kind of powerful, because then you're like, wait a second, there's actually a lot of us. This idea that we're a minority is absurd, really, because if you think of things in a global sense, people who are not white are the majority of the world, actually.
Yeah. The global majority. That's one of the languages that we use in community organizing now to talk about people of color, as opposed to like minority or people of color. It's like the people of the global majority, which is like an entirely different way of talking about it, and then like flips white supremacy on its head.
A lot
Um,
of changing, like us changing our language to reprogram our minds to
Yeah.
to change the system, to create a new system.
yeah,
That's a concept that, I mean, so I have heard that term before, but I never really internalized until you guys just said that. But I think that's something that I'm even going to try and start using in my daily, and in my daily vernacular is the global majority, because it's an absolute. You know, what is considered a minority is actually and factually the majority of this world. Most of the people in this world, in the world, not like the U.S. world, but the world, are not white. You know what I mean? Um, yeah. And so I just want to say that I'm gonna change my stance on that.
hey,
Keep
so
going.
I
Keep
think really powerful is like, if we're going to talk about oppression too, right?
going.
It's like you got to like think about language.
Yeah.
So like when we're talking about in our like in the United States, and what's funny is that I don't know who adopted this first, but like you'll hear minority pretty much like in like a lot of the most of like like what power countries is what I call them, right? Like
Mm.
countries that are able to exert like a large amount of power, and you know, and like the language around like minority, the language around third world countries, like these are languages, the language here is that, right, if you don't have like the technological like access and money access that we have, then you actually aren't fully developed. Like, that's what the statement is. It's like, nah, we just, like, sometimes people just chose not to like follow after all of the ways in which you're oppressing people and they want to do something different, right? Or maybe sometimes it's like you've oppressed people so long that they aren't able to get to where they want to be. So there's all these different like nuances that says, oh yeah, they're just behind us. And so like the minority one, I really push people around this because, if we were talking about minorities and we really meant that the way the term is supposed to be meant, then we would use that in different contexts, right? So, sometimes when you walk into certain cities, white people are the minority in that city. But if you hear people describe folks in those particular cities, they would still refer to people as color, right? Or the people of the global majority as minorities. Right. And so now it's like, oh, you actually don't mean that as like a statistical thing. What you actually mean that is as a racial thing. And so then what are you saying? Right? If you're saying I'm a minority, what does that actually mean? And
A
so
less than or something like that. That's the implication of being less than.
right,
Right.
exactly. Right. So yeah, what you're actually telling me is I'm less than you.
Yeah.
And now we have to have a conversation about that.
Yeah.
Say that, Alexis.
You know what? Can I really? Oh, Alexa, were you gonna say something about that?
I was being and joking.
Oh yeah, no, I think that's a really powerful thought around that, because you're right. Once you start talking about, if it's not about a statistic, then then it's about something else, and that's where the conversation has to happen. But are people willing to have that conversation? Now, I want to also like bring this around, because this is also because we're also part of the arts community and stuff like that. And we're also actors and performers and everything. I want to bring this level of oppression. I want to talk a little bit about that in the context of being a performer, right? Like how do each of these things that we've talked about, over these past few minutes, manifest themselves in the arts community, right? I know we're going to talk a little bit about representation in a couple of weeks as well, but I mean, there's a level of oppression that happens. Like, for example, I know we talk about Reeses a little bit more on this one, but like when we were in the UK, I saw something that I, and I think you were there, Alexis, when he was in his very last play, one of his last plays there that last year, and they cast him as like a sweeper or some sort of like janitor or something like that. And like, I mean, this is the brother's last play of his last year in drama school. And whoever that director was, I don't know who he was, but he had no right to do what he did. And he cast Reese as like this janitor-esque, lowly kind of like dude. Gave him a minuscule part, and then had everybody else kind of play these big old roles. Whatever. The play was great, but I almost walked out. Because of how they did him, right? And it wasn't just him. There were the other black characters that were in the play. Yeah,
Well.
all the other black actors in the play basically were these like lowly, stage hands or janitors, people. And it was like it was the biggest bleepity bleep 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 I'd ever seen. You know what I mean? And you were there, Alexis, so you can attest to that as well. But like, it opened my eyes even more, because I mean, it opened my eyes even more to see that, especially there in the UK, there's a certain look. There's a certain, yeah. You just have to. I feel. Help me, Alexa.
Yeah, no. Yeah, so it's there's no reverence, there's no care, there's no thought for people of color there. Like the way they cast them is we don't. Well, actually, I had my own kind of casting situation as well, and I mean, I ended up getting more on stage time in my last show because of saying something. So I got to at least stand on stage not, but really what was originally cast was that I would just be there for 5 minutes and then not be in the rest of the play. And what was told to me was like, oh, they said that, oh, I just didn't think of you. He was so genuine. He said, I just hadn't thought of you. And I felt like, and I kind of like teared up a bit because it wasn't even like, because it wasn't an insult. It wasn't saying it in a kind of like mean-spirited way. It was like a genuine, I don't think, like it's like they looking at us and they're seeing nothing. And it was a very, I don't know if you have you guys ever seen that meme of the brains where you have one brain going kind of like lit up and then another brain like even more lit and then it's like nirvana. But I was like, I see now. It's like I don't exist to you. Like you genuinely are not see-through. And it is unfortunate because Reese is such an amazing actor.
Yeah.
And it's when you think deeper into this thing, you're like, wait, so they're asking us to spend money, the same amount of money as our white counterparts, to get so much less, especially when their rule is that if you don't get cast in a big part, your class time is less. So your class time is based on how many lines you have. So if you're given, like I was given, 5 lines, then you don't have to go to class. You don't get to, not even like you don't have, it's packages, you don't have to go to class, but you don't get to go to class. You get to spend money and at home just kind of wondering, wow, I wonder what am I doing?
Yeah, and I think that's something that you see too, like not just in the UK, but just in the arts in general as well, which is why you see so many more like Black theaters and Black businesses start to come up in that, so that there is a proper amount of representation. I mean, you see it everywhere, even in the mainstream media with like the hashtag Oscars so white and all that kind of stuff. Like people are starting to wake up to this notion that there is not enough. Yeah, and I don't want to jump the gun too soon on representation, but there's not we're being oppressed and suppressed to the point where we can't tell our stories, and so there has to be a change. Go ahead.
Yeah, not just I was gonna say like, and it's also because of not just representation on film or on stage, but also in the executive producer,
Yes,
writer, director. Like that's where really we need to see the change, because then it just
trickles down. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, and I mean, I think like just coming from a perspective around like oppression around this and just bringing it back kind of like full circle to that is like there is a reason that media, like especially film, but like all of it, like wants people of color to be in oppressed roles, people of the global majority to be in oppressed roles, right? And that like helps to maintain the oppression through ideological means of who like people of the global majority are supposed to be. They're supposed to be janitors. They're supposed to be maids. They're supposed to be the servants of white people in our context. And so even when people are like doing it on accident, and I put that in quotations, because like for me, even if you did it without thinking, it's because you actually are doing your work. You see what I'm saying? It is your job to do your work, period. No one else's job. And so we can give you a pass, but we don't owe you a pass. Yeah. We have had a long time of racism existing in our context, right? If I want to give you mercy and I want to give you grace around it, which I actually think is like the most beautiful thing a person from the global majority can do, then yes, we'll do that. But we don't owe that to anybody. In fact, it's the opposite. White people particularly owe it to us to do their work so that they're ready to engage with us and do their work around their oppression, their racism, all that kind of stuff. So when they engage with us as human beings. They actually see us, as my sister Alexis said, right? So like I think that stuff happens on purpose, and it can be unintentionally on purpose. Is the language that I kind of like to use.
Yeah, it's like putting pineapples on your pizza. But let me just really quickly say too this one small point. that I personally don't want there to be a misconception. There are white people out there who are very woke, you know, and there are also people out there who think they are, who might have to like deal with a couple things that they might have let pass in their thing. But yeah, like if everyone did their homework and everyone, you know, did did their part in making sure that we that everything is recognized, not just like swept under the rug, or you know, like you know, just said, oh, giving an apology, but an active, you know, hey, all right, let's work on this, let's like talk this out, or let's read this thing, or da 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 da, rather than just like shutting down. I think that a lot of positive change can happen, just like with these conversations right now, with these talkbacks. I mean, last week we got a lot of great feedback. We had a lot of great questions come in, and so I hope that this is the start of something where people will feel open and welcome to talking back with us, and asking questions, and you know, just engaging in these types of conversations, because that's exactly what needs to happen, right?
And I just want to say one last thing. I
Pow.
I dislike the term woke only. I mean, I accept it because like it's part of our culture, our current culture, but I think sometimes the term woke is misleading to people, because then they feel like they're done, and we should always be waking. I feel like
Oh
always
yeah.
educating ourselves. Like you said, we should all do our homework and keep doing our homework. And I'm gonna try and keep doing my homework.
Yeah, that's a great point. Just keep doing it. It's like, yeah, back to theater. In acting, or in performing or whatever it is, you're always continuing to grow. So as one of our teachers in school told us, may you grow, you know, may you continue to grow. So that is what I wish on everyone else who is listening, and you all too. All right, y'all. So thank you again for joining us for this wonderful talk back, talking a little bit about oppression. Next week, we're going to be talking a little bit about, well, in the next coming weeks, we're going to be talking about representation. And then next week, we have someone who's coming on who is who's got a huge resume and has seen a lot of stuff in this world. He is a international recording artist and a musician who used to sing with the group, or who sings with the group As Yet. And his name is Sean Rivera, and so we can't wait to have him on our show next week when we chat with him. Then, so yeah, keep those questions coming in. We will answer them next week as well, and yeah, look forward to chatting with you again next week. Peace. Oh, yes, and thank you, William, and thank you, Alexis. Alexis, for coming back on the show. I just want to throw that out there, too. Now, for real now, peace.
Peace, everybody.